here is what we want to say first, that SAFTU was born on the 21st of April 2017, and it made a commitment to itself that it will be a democratic, a worker-controlled, an independent, a campaigning, fighting, militant trade union federation. That's the first commitment we made. The second commitment we made was that SAFTU will work shoulder to shoulder with other working class formations in an understanding that there is no trade union in South Africa strong enough to score victories for the entirety of the working class, nor there is a single working class formation working on its own strong enough to deliver victories for the working class. We, from the onset, understood that unity, not just of workers, but unity between organized workers and the entirety of the working class formations is sacrosanct. It is in that in mind that we are addressing you, the media, and the workers in South Africa, and the people of South Africa as a whole. We are participating in the initial shutdown of the 20th of March with that understanding, politically and ideologically. We are advancing our own demands, not that the demands of us are exclusive and are different and or in contradiction with the demands that are being pursued by all other formations who are participating on the 20th of March. We are participating because at the center of our own existence as the trade union movement, at the center of our own being as working class formations that are gathered here, is the issue of jobs, not just jobs, decent jobs that pay a living wage, that stand as a ladder in front of every worker to escape from poverty, but also to escape from inequalities. That's our first issue. In the context of South Africa of today, you will understand why SAFTU, together with these comrades, were in the streets on the 24th of August in a shutdown, and why again in February when the budget was being delivered, we were again holding each other's hands in Cape Town, demanding an end to the austerity budget so that there can be reindustrialization again that puts workers again at the center of ownership, but also at the center of ensuring that our manufacturing base is increased again to where at least it was at the dawn of democracy. South Africa's manufacturing used to contribute 22% to the GDP, and it is now down to half of that, to 11%. Most of our crisis in terms of unemployment flows from the deindustrialization of the economy. Even when South Africa developed a not bad industrial policy action plan, IPAP, but unfortunately, that industrial policy action plan is implemented within a totally inappropriate macroeconomic strategy that simply will never help us create the jobs that we need in the economy. So that's the first issue we are asking workers to join this demand for. It's the same old demand that we adopted at the birth of SAFTU, but it is also the same old demand that these working class formations put together when they had the first working class summit in June of 2018. The second demand we're pursuing is the demand to an end to load shedding. It's been 15 years of load shedding. Since the second half of last year, and in particular this year, we've been seeing load shedding every day. And again, as we say, the crisis of mismanagement, the crisis of corruption, the crisis of capitalism itself is always outsourced to the shoulders and the backs of workers in our society and everywhere else in the world. We have had enough. What we cannot do is to find reasons not to participate in a national shutdown because of whatever reasons, when our country is collapsing right in front of our eyes, when we now know every day we are subjected to load shedding, and when we are being told that load shedding will be with us for the next 2 years at the minimum. We cannot call ourselves pro-working class and pro-poor to the point that when there is a battle on the table, we, for whatever reason, will look on the other side instead of joining other forces that are pursuing the same demand in the streets of our country, that we must end load shedding. The third issue we are taking up, in the context of unemployment that is afflicting in particular black people, black women, and their youth, we have been demanding and championing a demand that South Africa can afford to introduce a universal basic income grant of 1,500 rands that will be paid to every unemployed person, and that will be paid to every worker earning a poverty wage in our country. So it's not just for the unemployed, it's for all of the people who are earning very low wages to the point that they cannot afford to buy a decent basket of food every day, every week, every month in their lives. That's our third demand we are pursuing. We are pursuing a fourth demand, that there must be the lowering of the food prices, of the fuel prices, which are going up again, of the electricity prices that have climbed 800% since 15 years ago when load shedding started, and the interest rates that are at 10.75% as we speak. According to the studies, even of the other side, the First National Bank published a study that shows that even the higher middle class in society spends their income and finish it in 3 days. 80% of the higher middle class. If the doctors, the advocates, the lawyers, senior lawyers, are only spending their income 3 days in a month is over, can you imagine what happens to the guys, the 8 million South Africans who are getting that 350 rands a whole month? Imagine what happens to the over 20 million people who are living through or being supported by the government social grant system. Imagine what should be the life of the workers who have a national minimum wage now at 25.5 rands a whole hour. Imagine what happens to the entirety of the working class in society. That's why we championing the demand that this government must do something to address the crisis of food insecurity, the crisis of fuel prices, the crisis of electricity prices, and the interest rates that no one can afford. Demand number 5, We are demanding a living wage. We believe that our country is wealthy enough to can afford to pay each and every worker at least a 72 rands per hour or a 12,500 for all workers. And I'm sure the people who are the 1% of the population that is occupying 45% of the wealth of this country are going to be the first one to say, but that their demand is totally unreasonable. It is unreasonable to them because such a demand will take us closer to a more equal society that we all demand. Number 6, we demand an end to the rampant crime and violence. And we're demanding that all of those who are making life hell for all South Africans, the criminals, must be arrested, prosecuted, and that all violence, including the violence against women and children and the elderly, must be put into our history. Our criminal justice system has totally collapsed. If a criminal justice system, according to the police, this is now statistics of about 4 years ago or so, in that the police would have gone to Parliament and told Parliament that we, the police, can only identify and arrest 48% of the people who commit crime in this country. 48%, meaning that 52% of the people who commit crime are never known, are never identified, are never arrested. Of the 48% that they arrest, they can only secure convictions in the courts of 15% of them. But they go further to say, of the 48%, or of the people who are being accused of raping, the police can only secure a 11% conviction rate. That's the source of the crisis in our country. Demand number 7 is a demand for a just transition to move South Africa from fossil fuel-based economy to the introduction of more renewable on the condition that not a single worker in the coal sector of the economy loses their job. We demand that just transition must be handed over to Eskom and not the independent power producers. We demand that the renewables be driven through the ownership of workers and the communities that will benefit from them. We see no role whatsoever for the independent power producers who have been allowed to enter into the space when Eskom initially was not allowed to get into that space of renewables. And that's why, as we speak, Eskom is being collapsed and hollowed out in favor of these independent power producers. Demand number 8, we are demanding the renationalization of Sasol, of ISCO, SAA, and other state-owned enterprises that the ANC government has sold partially or in full, and a full makeover of Denel, Prasa, Petro SA, Transnet, and so forth. Neoliberals and the conservatives today will say, oh no, where are they coming from still demanding nationalization? They will forget that if it was not because of the nationalization of the white-only regime from the 1920s, that white regime would have never resolved the crisis of white poverty in South Africa. And now that the black government is in place, the very same beneficiaries of nationalization are turning around to say, but nationalization itself is a swear word. Nobody must talk about this unless they say you are mad. So they will say you are mad. as we are making this particular demand. They were not met when they were building ESCOM to address the crisis of electrification then. They were not met when they had Telkom to ensure that there is telecommunication. They were not met when they created post office. They were not met when they created the railway system and Transnet, or they were not met when they created a Denel, a South African Airways, and you name them all. But now that the black government is in charge of our lives, they're saying to that black government, please sell all of these things to us, because you cannot run them. Of course, the ANC government every day is proving to them that it cannot run them. But what is the problem? The problem is therefore not the ideology and the policy of nationalization. The problem is the ANC government that has discredited the whole idea of ownership of the economy, or getting a government that can play a more active direct role in the economy as a developmental state. We are asking now, a demand number 9, that the government and the Reserve Bank in particular must reverse the budget cuts and increase government spending in critical areas of service delivery. All of us have in our own spaces as the working class pointed out that the response of the government to the world economic crisis of 2007 and 8 was through austerity, meaning that government decided, of course instructed from Washington and New York by the rating agencies, World Bank and the IMF, that it must target a lower GDP and to a debt ratio such that they look good in this world casino economy. So government have been absolutely pursuing this goal of a low debt to the GDP since then. The price of achieving that is through cutting expenditure, healthcare, education, policing, defense force, correctional services centers, Department of Home Affairs. Everybody across that delivers basic services is now having to contend with even lower levels of expenditure, when the demand should be actually that we're spending more and more resources in the infrastructure to ensure that our people have something in their pocket that they can spend in this economy to build its engines and to make sure that the economy moves forward. We're demanding 10 that there must be an expansion of the public sector as a whole. The wages of the public sector workers must increase. Expansion of the public sector means that the government must employ more educators such that it can be able to deliver on its own national minimum norms that says at least there must be one educator for every 30 kids, or the 25, 20 kids. The situation on the ground is that we are moving back to 30, 40, 50. There was one school in the Eastern Cape that have 100 plus kids for one educator. This is not sustainable. We're asking that the government must increase and expand the health sector. There are 40,000 vacancies. And those means that there are lesser nurses, lesser doctors, lesser specialized doctors in the public service as a whole. That's why when you go to the public sector hospital, you are more likely to meet a very stressed out doctor, nurse, and even other healthcare workers, such as the cleaners and the security. They are carrying the burden of people who should have been in the system but who are not in the system. We're asking for more police. We're asking for more traffic officials, for more correctional services, so that what you call it when you put people like in a tin in the correctional services centers, overwhelmingly overloaded in numbers. So our correctional services are no longer correctional services, but they are now where you breed more criminality for society. We're asking for more social workers. South Africa is the second most depressed nation in the entire world. I saw one study one day that says that 36% of us have mental issues in our various degrees. When you have lesser social workers to counsel even the police who are exposed to these levels of violence every day, it means you are breeding a society of suiciders. And that's why we have a suicide crisis, in particular by younger men in our society. We're asking that these people not just be hired, but they must be paid a living wage. Number 11, we're asking that the government must pay a living wage to its workers and must stop the wage freezes that have meant that at some point government have to walk away even from its side agreements with the public sector workers, or impose the 3% last year. It's good that the public sector workers did some little bit of a shuffling for the past 2 weeks that forced government to regain its senses and increase the 4.7% to a 7%, even before there are serious negotiations that will be joined by all the public sector workers. Demand number 12, we want an immediate insourcing of all security and cleaning, of all community health care, of all childhood development, and of all the EPWP workers. All of them are doing full-time jobs that were being done by nurses, the municipal workers, the teachers in the institution, and all of them. We're asking that they must be insourced. We appreciate the strides that our unions have made to ensure that at least there's a recognition of the community healthcare workers and that they are in the system of government as we speak, except in the Western Cape. But we want the same for the EPWP workers. We want the same for the security workers in all government institutions, in particular hospitals. We want the same for the cleaners that the government has outsourced over many years. Number 13, we're asking for a free and decolonized education of high quality, from our basic institutions of education up to our higher learning institutions. That demand have not been achieved, and we must pursue that demand until our education is free, not for some, but for all the citizens of this country. It is decolonized and it is of high quality. Number 14, we demand a rapid release of land for human settlement. It is absolutely abnormal that in our country we are now normalizing the effects and the agenda of colonialism. It was the system of colonialism that robbed the indigenous people of this country of their land and expropriated it without compensation for a 10% of the population, whilst forcing the 87% of the population to be in the 10% of the land, or occupy 10% of the land. That's what 1913 Act did. But unfortunately, I'm sure even if you can look at the latest statistics, we have not moved far from what was designed by that 1913 Act. So we demand the land back. How could we be staging marches and protests and shutdowns just to demand the land back, when we have a government that has been there for 29 years with a constitution with its limitations of the property clause, but a limitations that does not in any way inhibit the government from distributing that land for developmental purposes. How could we be packed like sardines in Siswetla and these informal settlements that are surrounding all of our towns and cities all over the country, as if we are now the foreigners in our own country? There are many, many other demands. I'm sure comrades are here. They are going to speak about these demands. The comrades from post office will raise the issue of how could it be that this government is now dismantling the basic telecommunication for ordinary people in the form of retrenching 6,000 from post office, another 5,000 again from telecom, and there's a job loss bloodbath, by the way, comrades. As we speak, workers are losing their jobs left, right, and center. No one claiming to have the best interest of those workers at heart will try to demobilize the rest of society from occupying the streets and staging protest on Monday, the 20th, whilst claiming to be a revolutionary. That's not revolutionary. That's a counter-revolutionary camouflaged in the red clothes or in the green or any of our colors, gold. Everybody who believes that South Africa is now unsustainable and that we have reached a point of being a failed state, everyone who counts those bodies in the streets every day, including counseling 135 women who get raped every single day, know where they should be on the 20th. And that is in the streets of South Africa, in a total shutdown, to send a message to the ruling elites, not even the ANC. The ruling class in South Africa is the 1% that occupies 45% of all wealth of this country. Is the 10% that occupies the 90% of the wealth of this country, in a situation where 90% of the population only must share 10% of the wealth of this country. It's not sustainable. And don't tell us to fold arms and do nothing, perhaps because we are a beneficiary of the system. Our protest action is going to be peaceful. We want to emphasize this. We are not the products of violence. We do not advance violent agendas against society. We are not products of any kind of intimidation, of robbing other people their right to exercise accruing from the constitution of this South Africa. It's going to be a peaceful demonstration. And that's what we're advocating. It's going to be, and let's repeat, a peaceful demonstration. This whole press conference yesterday by ministers and the statement of the president is a panic on their side. And they have a reason to panic, perhaps, because the lead is going to be taken off from the pot from Monday going forward. We're not going to do a once-off demonstration and they go back to peace and business as normal. No, this is one of many shots we have been firing, and we are going to be firing endless shots until load shedding is addressed, until the crisis of youth unemployment, women unemployment is addressed. But we insist on peaceful demonstration. And we're going to have to make a call to every one of us who will be part of the demonstrations and the shutdown on Monday. please do this peacefully and isolate any agent provocateur that may be planted by the other side to discredit the peaceful demonstrations that we're going to be having. So there's no need to assure everybody. SAFTU have been demonstrating these formations in their own individual rights, have been demonstration. This attempt to now associate us with what happened in July of 2021 is part of the propaganda by the other side to terrify the country and make us as if we are some barbarians who do not understand the basic tenets of the Constitution of South Africa. We're not barbarians, but we are going to be militant. And we're not sweethearts. We're going to be militant on Monday, even as we demonstrate in all of the assembly points that we have no time to list here. There are too many. There will be a shutdown. And there will be no one point where people must go to in the country. Shutdown is a shutdown. It will happen across every township, across every village, across every factory or mine. There will be a shutdown. That's what it means. A shutdown is something that we have attempted in the past and not succeeded in staging. But on Monday, there will be a shutdown. And a shutdown is a shutdown. But it will be peaceful. We call on workers to join, all of them. We have a protection for everybody.